Ladies and gentlemen, from South Carolina, would you please welcome Senator Jim DeMint.
I needed that this morning. It's been a rough week here in Washington. Some of our establishment friends are not real happy with me or you, so I think we're in good company today. But we've seen the power shift from Washington out to the people, where it's supposed to be, in a country where it should be a government of and for and by the people. It's happening now, and it's got a lot of people here in Washington scared, and it's changing things thanks to you all over the country. But I want to talk a little bit about why you're here, just the values issues this morning, and connect them with a lot of the other things that we cherish in this country. And let me just read something from a book here real quickly, and I call it The Myth. We've been told we can ban prayer, religion, and faith from schools, business, and public places and continue to be a strong and moral nation. We've been told that we can educate our children in a godless environment and still have responsible, productive citizens. We've been told we can subsidize unwed births and teach safe sex to teenagers and still maintain strong families in a commitment to the institution of marriage. These things cannot possibly be. We know what's happening in this country. We know that this idea that you need to separate your politics from your religion and from your values and from your economics, that this doesn't work. Because America is the most prosperous, the most compassionate, the strongest nation in the history of the world, because it rests on a set of principles that sit on a foundation of Judeo-Christian values. I hear regularly as I travel around the country, someone will tell me, I'm a fiscal conservative, but I'm not a social conservative. I want to straighten them out a little bit this morning, because the fact is, you cannot be a real fiscal conservative if you do not understand the value of having a culture that's based on values. Just last week, I was traveling around South Carolina, and a young man followed me out of the meeting, a young Republican, and he said, you know, Republicans can get back the majority if they'll just forget this religious stuff. And I said, I've been in there talking for 30 minutes. I never mentioned religion. What are you talking about? And he said, you know, the value stuff. And I said, what do you mean? I said, you mean like protecting the life of the unborn? He said, yeah. Or standing up for traditional marriage? Yeah, that's running the young voters around. Does illegal immigration fit in that? That's kind of, yeah, well, you know what I mean. He was kind of confused, and he really felt like that this sense of kind of moral or value issues were chasing people away. Folks, I'm convinced that it's the only way. If Republicans really want to build a big tent, if we want to stand and speak for the American people, we're going to have to understand how to integrate the value issues with our economic, political issues, because that's the only way they work in this country. Let me just talk for a second about this fiscal conservatism versus social conservatism, because I've done a good bit of study about it, and the fact is, one of the largest costs of the federal government is related to the values issues, to the dysfunctional society. If you track the correlation between unwed births and things like juvenile delinquency, drug use, dropout, incarceration, unemployment, the correlation is huge. Or sexually transmitted diseases, or gambling. You look at these things that are value-related issues. The costs are in the trillions of dollars that the federal government spends. And in trying to address these things that the federal government has helped to cause, we keep making it worse. For instance, unwed births were 6 or 8% in the early 60s, and now almost 40% of every child that's born in this country is from an unwed birth. And you can track the cost from there. But that was directly related to the incentives from the welfare program and food stamps and other things designed to help poverty. Those incentives were created. We've seen it, and as you look at what's happening to inner cities, you find that a lot of the drugs are bought with welfare money or food stamps converted with cash, and you keep tracking it out, and you realize one of the largest fiscal costs of our country are related to the dysfunction of our culture and the dependency on government, and that this has been caused by well-intended but misguided federal policy. You cannot connect it. The costs are huge. But even more than that, if you talk about the concept of freedom, you have to go back to the values issues. Because freedom is when millions of people are leading their own lives and making their own decisions from thousands of different choices provided by hundreds of different suppliers. Think about what Judeo-Christian values do in that environment. That people that believe that they're accountable to God, and because of that, they're honest, they have integrity. They care about others. They practice charity. They're volunteers. They have a strong work ethic. They're not only self-controlled and responsible for themselves, but they feel a responsibility for those around them. They're committed to marriage and family, their church. Think about a nation where millions of people are like that. They don't need a big government to control them. These are the people that build our community and build our strength and have the vision for what works in our country. But think about a culture that doesn't have the values, the restraint of being accountable to God. We see it all over the world. We don't have to guess at what it looks like. Where your economy works with bribes and corruption, your politics is just completely corrupt because of the people have no values and morals. And then you need a bigger and bigger government to control a violent people, violent and disruptive people. There is a correlation between values and freedom and prosperity, and we cannot let those in power tell us that there isn't. Freedom is millions of people making their own decision. Tyranny is when a few people make decisions for millions of people. When you have a big government, you're going to have a little God, fewer values and morals, and you're going to have a culture that has to be controlled by a big government. But when you have a big God, you're going to have a responsible and capable people with character to control themselves and lead their own lives. And you can have a little government that promotes freedom and allows people to keep more of their own money, and a government that's not bankrupt. We're talking about fiscal issues. What you're doing is helping to build the foundation of a culture of freedom and prosperity that made this country great. And we've got to take this message to the voters, to this young Republican I was talking to last week. But we do have to make a distinction so that the country would understand it. I don't know that the media is going to ever help us communicate this. But none of us want the government to push our religion. I don't want that. They've just messed that up too. But what has happened in their effort to purge religion from government is that they've also purged the values and the principles that are derived from biblical faith, from Judeo-Christian values. And the problem is we're no longer talking about the government itself, but as the government touches everything, our schools and our businesses and our organizations, the courts have now interpreted that that is the state, and we have to separate religion and values and principles from that. What we have to do is recognize we don't want government pushing religion, but we don't want the government purging our society of the values and principles that are derived from religion. Thank you. I think this young Republican would understand that if we talk in terms that they can understand. But I don't think America is going to take a lot more convincing. I think they've seen what happens with a big government in a dependent and dysfunctional culture. I think they know that if we stand for traditional marriage, if we stand for teaching honesty and integrity to our students in school, that we will have a more vibrant economy, a smaller government, and less taxes, the thing that all of us want. The good news in all of this is as government, as we've seen what an unmasked, an unbridled liberal majority is doing here in Washington, and how we've become polarized as one has gone further and further to the left, and some of us are trying to pull it back. What's happening here has so alarmed and distressed America that it is uniting Americans around some core principles. When I go to these tea parties, and I've been to a lot of them, they'll tell me three things when I wade into the crowd. They say, "Thanks for fighting. I'm praying for you. What can I do?" 40% of those people are Democrats and independents. And as I tried to tell my colleague, that's a big tent. That's a big tent. I tried to tell some of my colleagues after the 9/12 rally, folks, you've lectured me about a big tent. You've told me that if I try to elect conservative candidates that we're going to make that tent smaller. But last weekend, 1 million Americans brought that big tent to Washington, and they invited us in. Folks, and they were saying what we've been saying for years. Less spending, less borrowing, less taxes, less government takeover, small government, less taxes. This is what we've been telling people we want for years. They don't want to join us. They want us to join them. They want us to embrace those ideas, that energy, that passion for freedom in our country that we say we are as a Republican Party. There is a big tent out there waiting for us on November the 2nd this year. I think you're going to see Americans more united than they've ever been before. And within this move for fiscal discipline, behind it is a faith component that's stronger than I've ever seen in this country. Of people praying for what's happening. Not because they want the government to make anyone more religious or moral, but they want to make sure that there's a government that allows a people with character and capabilities, skills, and integrity to flourish in America once again. The good news for me as a Republican is this, is as some of you know, I've been working for the last year to stir up some vigorous primaries between establishment Republicans and between establishment Republicans and Republicans who stand for those principles of freedom. And folks, instead of diminishing our party, because of you and people like you all over the country, there's been one upset after another all over the country. And as you know, there have been some senior Republicans in the Senate who went out and campaigned on, "You need me because I can bring home the bacon." That even in Alaska, the home of bacon, they threw out that senator and ushered in Joe Miller, who has said, I don't care what we need here in Alaska, I don't want to bankrupt my country in its name. So what you and I can be excited about today, the primaries are over, and all over the country, we have candidates like Pat Toomey in Pennsylvania and Marco Rubio in Florida. We have Rand Paul in Kentucky and Sharon Angle and Christine O'Donnell. I mean, we have some candidates, folks. This is no longer voting for the least worst on the ballot. We've got some candidates that we can be proud of, that we know when they get to Washington that they're going to stand up and speak for you and the millions of Americans who for years have felt ignored. For Americans, thank you. Washington has treated Americans like they were stupid for too long. November the 2nd, you're going to see who's stupid, and they're going to be out of Washington, and you're going to be back in. Thank you very much. Thank you.